Picture it. It's the 1960s. The Cold War is at its absolute peak, and the space race is in full swing. Now, while the entire world was glued to their TVs watching America's Apollo missions race to the moon, the Soviet Union, well, they were quietly planning a series of incredibly daring, you could almost say suicidal missions to a completely mysterious planet, one they hoped would be their ultimate prize.
I mean, think about it. They poured billions of rubles and decades of work into this. They were the first to land on another planet, the first to send back pictures from the surface, the first to even record its alien sounds. So why, after all that incredible success, did they just stop? That's the mystery we're going to unpack.
So, first things first. In a race to the heavens, with the moon right there, why on Earth choose Venus? The answer, it really lies in the unique pressures of the Cold War.
This really highlights their completely different strategies. You see, America, under Kennedy, made a very public promise to put a man on the moon. It was a clear, shining goal, a PR masterpiece designed for global prestige. The Soviets, on the other hand, had already landed robotic probes on the moon, so they decided to aim for something else entirely. They figured, hey, if America can visit our familiar neighbor, the USSR could unveil a complete unknown.
Back then, Venus was a total enigma. A complete mystery. Scientists knew it was kind of like Earth in size and its distance from the Sun, which led to all this speculation about it being our twin. But it was wrapped in this thick, impenetrable layer of clouds. No telescope could see its surface. For the Soviets, though, this wasn't a problem, it was an opportunity. They believed that opening this secret box and revealing whatever was inside, jungles, oceans, maybe even life, that would be a far greater scientific achievement than just landing on the familiar, dusty moon. But prying open that secret box, well, it proved to be unbelievably difficult. The Soviet program, which they named Venera after the Russian word for Venus, began with a string of just crushing and often entirely secret failures. The whole thing started on a really tough note. The early 1960s were just brutal. Their very first attempt didn't even make it out of Earth's atmosphere. Then Venera 1, the first probe ever sent towards another planet, went completely silent after just 1 week, lost in the void. 4 years later, Venera 2 did the exact same thing, and these were just the missions they actually admitted to.
You see, the Soviets had a policy of extreme secrecy. A mission was only announced to the world if it was a success. If a rocket blew up on the launch pad or a probe just failed to reach its target, they'd often just pretend it was a heavy satellite launch, or say nothing at all. Historians now call these failures the ghost missions.
After years and years of failure, things began to change. The probes weren't quite succeeding yet, but they were getting just close enough to send back some absolutely terrifying clues about the true nature of Venus.
Take Venera 3, for instance. It was basically a suicide mission. It had no landing gear or anything. Its only job was to get into the atmosphere and send back data. Unfortunately, its systems completely fried on the way down, and it sent back absolutely nothing. But on March 1st, 1966, it crash-landed, making it the very first human-made object to touch the surface of another world. A failure, yeah, but a pretty historic one.
The next year, Venera 4 made it a little farther. As it descended on a parachute, it was actually transmitting data before it suddenly went silent. At first, the Soviets claimed it had landed safely, but the truth was way more dramatic. The immense atmospheric pressure had literally crushed the probe like a soda can miles above the surface. But just before it was destroyed, it revealed a stunning fact. The atmosphere of Venus was almost entirely toxic carbon dioxide.
With this horrifying new data, the Soviets realized they weren't building space probes anymore. They were building armored tanks to be dropped into an oven. So the next mission was designed with just one goal in mind: survive.
So meet Venera 7. This thing was an absolute beast. Over-engineered, heavy, stripped of most of its science gear. Its only real job was to survive the landing and tell them what it was like down there. But even with a probe this tough, things went wrong. Its parachute ripped on the way down, causing it to slam into the surface at almost 40 miles per hour and just tip over.
But it survived. Tipped over and damaged, it still managed to transmit data for 23 agonizing minutes. And the first thing it told us was the temperature. A staggering 465 degrees Celsius, or 869 Fahrenheit. That's more than twice as hot as a regular oven. It's hot enough to melt lead.
Next up was the pressure. Using the data, Soviet scientists calculated the surface pressure to be 90 times greater than what we feel on Earth.
To put that in perspective, that's the same pressure you'd feel 1 kilometer, or over half a mile, deep in the ocean. That kind of pressure wouldn't just dent a submarine, it would instantly vaporize it.
And as if that wasn't enough, by analyzing these tiny shifts in the radio signal as the probe fell, they figured out the wind speeds in the upper atmosphere were hitting 360 kilometers per hour. That's faster than a Category 5 hurricane. They had finally opened the secret box, and inside, they found a literal hell.
So now that they knew what they were up against, the Soviets entered the golden age of their Venus program. They were about to achieve some of the greatest firsts in the history of space exploration, but they were also about to be plagued by the most ridiculously frustrating technical glitch you can possibly imagine.
This was their peak, their moment. On October 22, 1975, Venera 9 did something no machine had ever done before. It sent back a photograph from the surface of another planet. For the first time, humanity saw an alien world not through a telescope, but from the ground up. It was this desolate, sharp, rocky landscape under a dim, oppressive orange sky. An absolute triumph.
But this is where the frustration kicks in. See, these probes had 2 cameras for a panoramic view. On Venera 9 and its successor Venera 10, only one of the 2 lens caps popped off. A partial victory, I guess. On the next 2 missions, Venera 11 and 12, neither lens cap opened. They survived for over an hour, sending back tons of other data, but not a single picture. Then came Venera 13, a huge success. The first color photos, even sound recordings of the wind. But its successor, Venera 14, suffered the most comical failure in space history. Its soil testing arm deployed perfectly and landed directly on the lens cap it had just ejected, where it dutifully measured the composition of its own trash. You can't make this stuff up.
After the incredible triumphs and just absurd frustrations of the landers, the Soviets decided it was time to change their strategy for the final phase of the Venera program.
So the final missions, Venera 15 and 16, they never even tried to land. Instead, they just stayed in orbit for 8 months, using these powerful radars that could pierce right through the thick clouds. They meticulously mapped the entire northern hemisphere of the planet, revealing these massive volcanoes and 1,000-kilometer-long cracks on the surface for the very first time.
So after 2 decades and 18 missions, what was the final picture? Well, that idea of an Earth twin was completely obliterated. In its place was the image of an inferno, with a crushing carbon dioxide atmosphere, clouds of sulfuric acid, and surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead. It was the ultimate cautionary tale, the first real-world example of a runaway greenhouse effect, a discovery that fundamentally changed how we understand planetary climates, including our own.
Which brings us right back to our original question. Why did they never go back? Well, maybe the best way to look at it is this. The Venera program wasn't a failure. Not at all. It was a stunning, terrifying success. The Soviets set out to solve the mystery of Venus, and they absolutely did. They proved, definitively, that it was a hellscape beyond anyone's worst nightmare.
They had conquered what many people started calling the Soviet planet. They gave Russia names to its craters and its valleys. They saw its surface, they heard its winds, and they felt its crushing pressure. And in the end, their monumental effort answered the question of what lies beneath the clouds of Venus with such horrifying clarity that only one logical question remained. After you've successfully mapped hell, what is there left to do but leave